Hi guys, it's Professor Fernandez, and I'm here to teach you how to take notes in class. You have probably never taken notes before, and essentially what taking notes is, whether you're in an online class or whether you are in a face-to-face class or a hybrid class, means that you're kind of writing down the gist of what is being said or what is being read or what you're seeing in a video. It's not recording anything word for word. You're not a stenographer, but it makes you or forces you to listen to things, write down kind of like the main idea or the gist of it, kind of the summary of it, and has you looking at it and trying to understand the concepts. Now, there's different types of note-taking devices. There's a couple that I do not recommend. I do not recommend recording anything in a classroom unless you have an accommodation for that. But I don't recommend that simply because if you're in a 1-hour lecture or 3-hour lecture and all you're doing is recording, you're going to have to listen to that 1 hour and 3-hour lecture again. So I don't recommend that. And I don't recommend just writing things down and not looking at it later unless you need to, right? So the idea of notes is to be active. And I'm going to tell you what that means here in a second. To be active with the knowledge that's being disseminated to you. So that requires you to be a student that is constantly studying, well, not studying, but looking at their notes and reviewing their notes after the class, and being more active in your education. So one system that I really like is the Cornell Notes system. You've probably heard of it. Some of you have probably used it and hated it. I'm going to teach you how to use this. It's actually really simple. I liked it. I came across it as an undergrad and changed the way I took notes. And that changed the way how I studied and how successful I was in college. So I'm going to teach you how to do this. And of course, I'm going to do a screen share and we're going to go through the whole thing. So let's get started. Okay, so what we have here, my friends, is what a Cornell note looks like. So Cornell Notes actually takes their names from Cornell University, and this is a system that they developed for their own students, and word got out, and so now this is what they use, and a lot of people use this here. So you can buy notebooks that already do this for you. Already has these lines set up for you. They make those. You can Amazon it. College campuses have those. I'm not quite sure if we have it we may have it on our campus at Kingwood. I'm not quite sure. It's been a while since I've been in a bookstore, but I'm pretty sure they can order you some. So this is what it is. And you have a couple of things set up here. Of course, if you don't want to buy the notebook, but as an aside, you can always do this in your regular notebook and just use a ruler and draw these lines. So that's always an option too. But here you have a couple of lines here. You've got this line that's here on the top. You've got this line that kind of goes on the side and this line that comes here, right? So you've got 1, 2, 3 lines that's drawing a couple of sections here. You have this section here, which is important. All the sections are important. You've got this section here, and you don't want to make, if you're drawing this, you don't want to make this too thin. You kind of want to make this pretty substantial here. Not as big as this section here, but just kind of enough room to write because you're going to be writing stuff here. And of course, this section here, you want to make this a little bit bigger than you think you're going to need. Okay, so each of these sections have a title or a name here. So this is the title. This section is called the title. This section is called the cue. This section is called notes. And this section is called the summary. Okay, and pretty much all of these are, the names actually tell you what goes in here. So let's start with the title here first. The title of every page I would say every page, but if you're in a notebook with this, you can just title the first page of that series of notes um, by either the subject or the class. And by subject, I mean the subject that's being talked about. So if you're talking about um, the Civil War, or you're talking about Reconstruction, or you're talking about compare and contrast essays, or you're talking about the thesis of compare and contrast essays, that's what I mean by subject. Or you can title it by class. History 1301, English 1302, EDUC 1300, whatever it is. This is completely up to you. Up to you. Hello. Let's do this correctly. Okay, up to you. Right? So you can categorize it how you want. I personally would go with the subject of what is being taught, because that makes it easier if you're going to say have a quiz again on like World War One, or the Battle of the Bulge in World War One, and that's what you titled your notes, then you just go back to those notes, right? So that's what that is. So that is, of course, the title page, the title part of the page, and that's what goes in there. Nothing else goes there at all. You can do nothing else, right? So then after the title is kind of like the big money maker, it's the notes section. And the notes section here, you actually are going to take notes. And so there's a couple of ways you can take notes here. You can make sure you can just take the gist of things and make sure that you leave a space between concepts. So if they're talking about a particular thing that happened, say, in the civil rights movement, and I'm using history a lot because I used to take a lot of notes in history. So they're talking about perhaps the march in Birmingham, and then the next march is Selma, right? You're going to leave a space in between those two concepts. So that way you have your eyes can actually see, oh, this is different than this. What you don't want is to squish everything in there. So you're going to have several pages of notes, right? Because of how this is formatted here, you're not going to be able to fit everything in that one space of notes. So you're going to have several pages of notes, and it's going to be spaced out, and you want them to be spaced out, because what you don't want to do is try to put everything in that, and then you're not able to read, or you're overwhelmed by it. This is just a visual point. Just for the folks who are visual people, or even folks who are not visual learners, do you feel overwhelmed whenever you have to read something and it's just a bunch of words on the page? There's no spaces, there's no like space on the side. You're just like, oh my God, it's just a page of text. And you're like, what is this, right? It's the same basic concept here. So a couple things you can also do here is that you can use bullet points, and that helps a lot with like organization. For example, if you're taking notes on like a compare and contrast essay video, you can say, okay, so the thesis has 3 points. It has this, it has this, it has this, right? You can bullet point it so you can understand kind of the hierarchy of the concepts here. And it just kind of sets it off and says, okay, I have to make sure that these 3 bullet points are covered in my essay, or these 3 things or concepts that may come up in a text. Then, of course, you have the idea of abbreviating. And abbreviating, I love abbreviating. So you can abbreviate several different ways. I personally like to eliminate vowels. I use this even when I was a reporter for several newspapers, where you actually kind of become a stenographer at one point because you want to get the quote accurate. So people speak very quickly sometimes. And so you have to write very quickly. And so what I would do is just take out the vowels, and just do all the consonants, unless, of course, the vowel is a word like the word A, as you see here, and just write the sentence without it. Of course, you see this is Mary had a little lamb. That's the example sentence here. Excuse me. And you know that it's Mary had a little lamb because you can kind of see like, oh, your brain automatically puts the vowels back in. So If you're writing and you're just like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm writing every word, or just like she's going so fast, or they're going so fast, you can you can abbreviate as well. Well, another thing you can do is use like diagrams or designs here. So you can design a concept like, okay, this goes here, that goes here. So this is like the main idea here, and different concepts, right, are all around there. So you can also draw that here. So however you want to do your notes, you have that as well. And the idea is that you are listening for things, right? So the first important thing about taking notes isn't so much what paper you use, what pen you use, and like how to write things down. It's literally listening. And so you kind of want to prepare to listen. I personally would write down anything that a professor writes on the board that they're writing that concept. I would write that. Usually a professor will write down the word or the concept, but then lecture. So that kind of is a hint that says, all right, this concept about reconstruction, they'll write reconstruction on the board, and then they'll talk to you about reconstruction. So you write down reconstruction and then you listen for what they're saying. Anything that's repetitive, anything that a professor in a lecture repeats a couple of times or puts emphasis on, and emphasis can come in different forms. They can yell it, they can go really slow as like a dramatic storytelling type of moment. They can kind of beat a dead horse, is kind of how I like to say it, but they're saying it one way, then they say it a different way, then they say it another way. So there's 3 different ways of saying the same thing. That's probably going to be a question on the test. So you more than likely are going to want to write that down and try to understand that. Okay, so that's your notes section. That's like, the mini shot right there. So then what you have after the title and the notes, this is what you do after class. You could do this during class, and some students have done that during class. What helped me when I was a student is to do these next 2 sections after class, like directly after class, while the lecture and the ideas are fresh in your mind, right? So say if you have the history class and the math class, and they're right next to each other, right? Or they're right after each other. And so what I would do is that when history was done, I'd gather up my things. I would go to my math class. I would open up my history notes and go through these really, really quickly. After, of course, I prepare to take all my stuff from math class out, I would go through them really quickly. And then when math class starts, I would close these up and then do math. Or you can go to history, go to math, go to English. And then when you have time, and you should build in your schedule like a break where you can actually sit down and actually breathe. In Kingwood, we actually have common hour when we're on campus. And so common hour is usually from 12:30 to 1:30 or 12:20 to 1:20. And during that time is what you want to do is go grab yourself a little snack, go grab yourself some food, open up your notebook, and just do this part. So let me explain what this part is. This part is called the cue part, right? That's what it's called. It's called cue. And what it does is that it cues you to some things that you want to kind of understand. It also helps you to kind of see what your notes, what things are in your notes. So you can write down here almost in the margins, right? Key ideas, any vocabulary that you don't know or vocabulary things that you need to understand. That's there. The important stuff. So, that professor who says things 3 different times, right? You may want to put that there. And then any questions as you are reviewing your notes that comes up. Things like, oh, I didn't quite understand what the professor said in lecture, or there's this concept in the book, but that the professor didn't go over today. I wonder what that's about. And so you want to list your questions there. This is why this is super important, and especially for online classes. It's super important because you live and die as a student by the questions you ask or you don't ask. So if you don't understand a concept and you don't ask it, the professor doesn't know you don't understand a concept until the test happens or the paper happens. And then that's when they understand that you don't understand. But at that point, it's too late. You've already taken the test, you've already written the paper, and you get the grade that you get. So understanding that you've got to be active, and this is what it means to be active with your notes, going back and reviewing your notes as soon as you possibly can, trying to understand them, and then writing down questions that you don't understand or questions that need to be clarified. For example, if, and this happens to us professors all the time, we say one thing in a video, and then in the online class, we say something different. Or the video is probably a couple of years old, or a couple semesters old. We say something different, and then you have a question that needs to be clarified. Trust us, we don't know what we said last semester. We've had a hurricane or a freeze or a pandemic since then. So trust us, we don't remember. But the video is still good, but something may have changed. So at that point, what you want to do is write down those questions and email your professor or ask for office hours and just say, hey, I have a couple questions. I want to go through these with you. And there has not been a professor that I know that has not said, oh my gosh, like these were really great questions. I'm glad they asked it. And then if they're clarifying questions, like they'll probably share that with the rest of the class, and you're a superhero if you do that, right? So, so you as a student live or die by the questions you ask and you don't ask. It's better to over ask than to under ask. You may annoy your professor by over asking, but at the end of the day, it's your grade. So do your due diligence. And so you have the title, the notes, and the cueing. And with the cueing, you write down your key ideas, your vocabulary words, all the great stuff, the questions. And then you have the summary of notes. And this right here is super important. The summary of notes is you're summarizing what you know, right? And you're kind of explaining it to someone who wasn't there. This, I'm going to say, is a pain. I'm going to say it is a pain. What I did is that I would do the summary of notes at the end of the notes, not like on every page. You can do it on every page if you'd like. But what I would do is that at the end of the notes for that particular lesson or that particular day, at that last page of my notes, I would summarize everything from that lesson. And the reason you want to do the summary of notes here is not so much that, oh, you're summarizing your notes, so that should be easy for you. You're actually trying to see if you understand the concepts, right? After you take the notes and you write down your key ideas and the important stuff, and you ask the questions, write down the questions, you ask the questions, you come back and you're like, okay, do I really understand this concept? Can I explain this to someone who wasn't there, or someone who doesn't take history 1301 or composition and rhetoric 1302? Can I explain this? And if the answer is yes, I can explain it to the best of my ability and knowledge with no questions on my end, then more than likely you probably have this concept, right? If you can't explain it, you got to go back and look through your notes again, maybe do the reading. If you're taking notes from the reading, or if you're taking notes from the video, you may want to watch it again. At that point, you may have more questions to ask. You would list more questions, right? You would list more questions here. And so that is what it means to study. That is what it means to be active with your notes. And so this isn't just so much a note-taking, a way to take notes, but it's more of a way to study, and trying to understand concepts. There's so many concepts you want to understand in college. because not only you need it for probably the next semester, right? You understand, for example, in English 1301, how to write a really good paragraph or understand concepts like a topic sentence or a transition, or understand the concepts of writing a good compare and contrast or a good argument paper, right? Because in 1302, I'm not showing you that, but you're writing it anyway, right? Everyone should have known how to write a response essay. Everyone should know how to write a compare and contrast essay, know how to do an argument. And so you already know how to do that. So now you're just showing. It's the same concept for other things. So understanding the concepts helps you that way, and also makes you a better critical thinker, which is what you want at the end of the day. You want to be a better critical thinker to be a better citizen of the world. So here, and it starts here with taking notes. So again, this is what everything is kind of called, kind of what you want to do. The title is the title, the notes you take notes, like this is like your examples. Sometimes it also goes in the notes. The Q section cues you on things like, oh, Professor something or another, Professor Appleseed said this really cool thing about a thesis. Where is that? And then you can look at your Q section and like see, okay, here's where the thesis thing is. And you look in your notes and you're like, okay, this is what I needed to know. And then there's summary. Your summary, you want to reread your summary from time to time, right? Because when you're going back and studying, that's when you read the summary and you remind yourself like, oh, this is how I understand this. Okay, da 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 da. Make sense? Makes sense. So how is this actually going to be used? Okay, so this is an example that I actually did to prep for this video. I watched other videos because it's been a while since I've done Cornell Notes. And I spelled Cornell completely wrong, but that's okay. And so I put it all together, right? And so I took notes on a section of a video, and then I did a couple of these things that we talked about, right? I got the gist here. This is kind of the gist of things. This is the gist of things. And this is actually this concept is repeated twice, right? This was repeated a couple times in the video that I watched. So I wrote those down. And then, of course, you have here the hierarchy of things, the bullet points that I talked about earlier. And of course, I have a couple of abbreviations happening, right? So it's a combination of all that that's happening here. And then I have my cue on the left-hand side. I know that this is what research studies are saying. So if I say I'm studying and maybe I'm taking a test or open book test, or I know that my professor really loves to talk about research. I'm one of those professors. I know that I probably should look at this part a lot. So it tells me where this is. This gives me kind of tips. So I know I can go back and look at these tips. And then as I'm reviewing this, right, I see that the word active is in here twice. And the concept of being active with note taking is talked about twice. And I'm not quite understanding. So here's my question. What does active brain mean? Maybe this is a concept that's not discussed in your class or in the video or in the lecture, right? And so you want to send the professor a note, or maybe the next time you go in the class, you maybe have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class or a Tuesday, Thursday class, and then you write this on Monday, you review it, and then you're prepared on Wednesday. First thing, professor, I have a question from the last lecture. When you said active brain, what do you mean? And so the professor can take some time and discuss this concept with you. So that's where you have that. And then, of course, this is the summary. And this summarizes everything here, right? This summarizes the whole thing, how this works, and it kind of explains it to myself or explains it to someone else who wasn't watching this particular video. So there you go. That is the concept of Cornell Notes, more like a study system rather than anything else. I personally enjoyed it as my undergrad. I didn't use it much for my graduate school work because it was a whole different animal. But for my undergrad, especially for classes that were really tough, my communications theory class was super tough. I used the Cornell Notes, and you can use it not just for lectures, but you can use it for video stuff you have to watch in an online class. Maybe this one. You can also use it for chapters that you have to read for class. Maybe you're in a biology class or in a science class or in a math class, and the professor asks you to read the certain chapter. You should probably read the chapter before you come to class. That's another tip I can give you for studying. You know that a certain chapter is coming up because it's in the syllabus. In the syllabus calendar, and you know that next week y'all are going over chapter 10. You may want to read chapter 10 before go into class, take notes on it, so that way when it's being explained in lecture, you have some knowledge of it. And so really you're just clarifying what you have, and it makes you a more active student. And you'll have some really good notes. So chapter 10 quiz comes and it's an acing, you're acing the test. So that's neither here nor there. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that this helps you study, helps you become a better student. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.